The film Shakespeare in Love tells an imaginary story of the genesis of one of the most Shakespeare's famous plays, Romeo and Juliet. This play is and has been the symbol of never-ending love, and it has inspired artists in every field. Paintings like the one of Frank Dixie, music like Romeo and Juliet from Dire Straits, and musicals such as West Side Story. But what probably Shakespeare meant at the time was nothing about celebrating love. In Romeo and Juliet, love does not conquer at all, while it brings bloodshed, murder, and definitely nothing positive. In the play, love is presented as an overwhelming power, as Lady Viola in the film of Shakespeare in Love says, love that overthrows life. The two youngsters are struck by love, and since then they start speaking of death, suicide, and grave, as Juliet, when she asks her nurse to inquire the name of Romeo and says, "If he be married, my grave is like to be my wedding bed." We need to think of the audience that Shakespeare wrote for, and that audience didn't marry for love. Love between Romeo and Juliet was pretty frightening for the people at the time. In the end, two families are broken apart, and at the time where patriarchy was all, being a part of a strong family was the most important thing in life. Women were expected to find a husband, but not on love, but on wealth. As stability was a need, and stability came from the family by its reputation or its position at court. When in the film Lord Wessex informs Lady Viola that they are going to get married, she replies in arrows, "But I don't love you." And he looks at her in amazement, stating that a marriage is not a question of love. He talks about the fortune of her family, the fortune of his family, and how this will grant stability to her, concluding with, "That is the only matter of discussion here." The film is clearly a modern interpretation, as no girl at the time would have ever turned down a marriage proposal because she wasn't in love with the man. And most important, because she would have had no right to speak about this. Only her father could. That is why Juliet's mother can't believe her grief and desperation when they tell her that she is going to marry Paris. Juliet's reaction is difficult to understand to Donna Capuletti, but also to the audience of the time. In expressing her sorrow, Lady Viola in the film states, "Can a lady of wealth have a love marriage?" Good question, as the answer is absolutely no. Nor Viola nor Juliet can. Looking at the situation under this perspective, it is interesting to consider what the Queen in the film says. When Lady Viola goes to meet her, as she has to give her consent to her marriage with Lord Wessex, the Queen talks about love, and in the plays, and she states they know nothing about love. They make it pretty, they make it comical, they make it lust, but not true. And so a bet is stated. Can a playwright write a play of true love? Shakespeare indeed wins the bet. But the true nature of love is absolutely horrifying for what has done to Romeo and Juliet and for what has done to him and Lady Viola, who are now facing a deep moment of grief. One of the things that makes Shakespeare so fascinating is that we can find modern problems in plays that were written 400 years ago. For example, a modern interpretation of Romeo and Juliet can be the eternal conflict of teenagers with their parents and society. Against Romeo and Juliet, there are not only their families, but also religion, as they cannot consume their love unless they are married. And marriage is not an option for them. But they have it anyway. They get married, they satisfy their lust against all odds, but sadly this only leads them to their grave. This can be seen as a discouragement to the young kids to go against their parents, as they know what is good for them. How are women in Shakespeare's plays? The women that Shakespeare creates in his plays are in reality way ahead of the vision of his time. Think of Emilia in Othello when she declares women are like men, or Portia in The Merchant of Venice that disguises herself as a lawyer as she is so good in perorating her cause that nobody notices her gender. The theme of women in society is frequently debated in Shakespeare's plays. All through his plays, there is a sense that in order to thrive and stay in the society, women have to wear a mask. This idea can be found even in the film Shakespeare in Love, where Lady Viola disguises herself as a man in order to participate to the casting and then to the play, as women could not act at the time. The modernity of Shakespeare is also shown by the fact that when he discovers her real identity, he is not amazed at all by the fact that she can act, and also very good. The Queen in the film is a key character for this theme of women and society in Shakespeare, as she is a woman, but she cannot wear a mask of a man like Portia in The Merchant of Venice in order to do her job as a sovereign. She clearly states at the end of the film, "I know about a woman in man's profession." The character of the Queen in the film is skeptical, witty, sharp and direct. As she is not a young woman anymore, we get the idea that surviving at court for a woman is way more difficult than for men. But she clearly is more intelligent than every man around her. We get the idea that she has earned the respect of all the others. Lady Viola is able to fool everyone, even Shakespeare, with her mask, but she is also very responsible, as she knows that despite the fact that she loves William, she will have to marry Lord Wessex, a daughter's duty, as she calls it. She doesn't go against her family, and she is clearly more mature and more pragmatic than William is. Juliet is more pragmatic as Romeo as well, as while Romeo talks about poetry of love, she is more concerned about wedding and consuming. This elevates Juliet to a more sensible, that is reasonable person than Romeo, while the popular concept sees women as less logical when it's about love. Do you need more proof of how Shakespeare considered women? Think of the final act of suicide of the two lovers. If you have seen one or two crime series, you will know that killer women are more likely to use poison in their murders, while men are more likely to use physical contact or weapons. Is this what happens in Romeo and Juliet? No! Romeo drinks a poison, while Juliet stabs herself. It is almost as the roles have been swapped. The idea of women and masks in order to live in the society is brought on at the end of the film, where Shakespeare begins to write the 12th Night. Viola, in the 12th Night, needs to disguise as a man in order to get help on the shore, or nobody would give her credit. So, since the beginning of the film, Shakespeare is portrayed as a young man who hasn't discovered his genius yet. More than being inspired by love for writing Romeo and Juliet at the end of the film, we get the idea that he is inspired by the strength and courage of women. Indeed, by Lady Viola. So thank you for watching this video. Please, if you like it, don't forget to press like at the end of it. Don't forget to like our page on Facebook, All You Can Learn Arese, and to stay updated to other episodes of Ease Your Quarantine with Literature. If you have anything to comment, please feel free to do it below this video. Thank you, and see you soon.